Hey everyone, welcome to a special edition of AI Insiders with AI Marketers Guild, and we've got a great guest today, a partner in architecture media, and a company I've been learning from quite a bit throughout my career, especially as I shifted more toward the B2B side. That's Bombora. We've got their co-founder Michael Burton here. There's a lot we'll get to dive in deeper. Bombora really is so much of what I consider at least the gold standard, or even some of the glue that ties so many other platforms together. Because I can't tell you how many pitches I've been on where they say that one of their one of their best features is that they have Bombora data built in, right? It's almost like, and I think you've done a great job with this sort of Intel Inside, version of it. And I'm just very excited to learn way more about this and dive in here. And so, Mike, welcome aboard.
Yeah, David, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate that warm intro. And kind of hits on some of the themes I think we were planning on covering, and I'm excited to be here, and hello to everybody who's on.
Great. Well, yeah, I mean, feel free to kick things off. Got the slides up here, and yeah,
Great.
let's do it.
Yeah, I thought it would be useful just to give some really fast context on the B2B ecosystem and kind of a little bit about the role that Bombora plays within it. And then hopefully just kind of talk more conversationally around what we're seeing in the marketplace and how things are evolving, certainly with AI, but just kind of at large, with AI being a component, but, kind of like these other broader shifts that we're seeing as well.
Great.
Cool. So we could just build a little context, like kind of exactly like David said. We were really built around kind of being this point of glue for a lot of the B2B ecosystem. So we think about things in terms of like the full B2B funnel, right? So if marketer wants to run a top of funnel awareness branding type campaign, we play a role there, all the way down to the SDR trying to decide who to make a phone call to on a Monday morning inside of a sales use case. We kind of were built to make high quality intelligent B2B data available across the entire ecosystem, across the entire funnel. So on the next slide here, I'll just tell a little bit about how we do that. So kind of in the same exact spirit, we built the business around a cooperative of publishers. So going back, 10 years ago now, we started working with a lot of, vertical trade associations, trade publications, broader business focused websites. So think, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Forbes, Fortune, etc. Events companies, lead gen companies, our best effort to kind of build a proxy for the B2B internet. And across that large B2B ecosystem, we're kind of, boiled down to two things. We're monitoring companies consume B2B research and get a good understanding of what they're interested in, what they might be gearing up to research and buy. And we're able to track anonymous B2B professionals. And that data becomes, kind of core to account-based and other B2B advertising that takes place across the ecosystem. So in the next slide, we get into kind of like the different techniques that we have to be good at to do this well. Right? We need to be able to use our tag across this ecosystem, understand what pages are being consumed, how much time and effort people are spending on those pages, what companies the users work for that are consuming those pages, and then build those all into models that give us a really good opinion on what companies are interested in and what they might be gearing up to buy. So then finally, we take that raw material from the cooperative, we take those techniques that I just brushed past really quickly, and we kind of make these three things available. Company level intent data, identity resolution. So this is the ability to say, hey, here are anonymous users on your website and everything we know about them, like what companies they work for and what job titles and job functions they have. And then, like I mentioned, we're also able to take this anonymous device level data and power a lot of B2B advertising. So all of that kind of like great data that I described boils into these three different offerings that Bombora brings to market. And then, yeah, last thing here, just for context, is a lot of what David said at the top. We're very, very much an ecosystem business. So not really a platform that you would come and kind of control your entire go-to-market from, but more of a data source that gets distributed out into all of the platforms and places where the actual, use cases are enabled, whether those are ad tech advertising platforms, or like I was saying, all the way down into these sales intelligence, and sales tech type platforms and everything in between. So hopefully that just kind of acts to set the stage for kind of where Bombora is coming from, as we watch the market evolve and that type of thing. But David, I don't know, you could gut check me if that all made sense and anything I should clarify.
Yeah, well, it all makes sense. I'd imagine one of the most frequent questions you get is, how do you have this actionable anonymous data? What can you collect? What can't you? And just getting a little bit more of a sense of how privacy works, especially as that, as the guardrails always seem to be moving on that one.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is having a direct relationship with the publisher.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways in all B2B and B2C. There's kind of like back doors and side doors where you can build data assets without having a direct relationship with a publisher or the end user. So because we have the direct relationship with the publisher, kind of step one, we're in their consent string. That allows us to store consent from end users as users are opting into the privacy policies of those publishers. That's really, really important. So then it's like, then you put the B2B specific lens on it, and we think through things very much on a company level. So we're not so much interested in understanding that this is John Doe at Boeing. We're really interested in understanding that this is an anonymous user who works at Boeing. And then we're interested in understanding of all of those users that we've tagged at Boeing. I think of them as a big kind of like swarm of bees. What are they interested in now more than they normally are? But this is where B2B kind of has a little bit of an advantage. We're not interested in people as much. So between, solid consent and relationships with the publishers and kind of B2B in general being more of a company level proposition, that's kind of our POV, or where we sit from a privacy perspective.
And so when you say what people are interested in, like how much of this is the content they're consuming on these publishers, or what signals ladder up to interest?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like anything that we can see being consumed across our ecosystem. So it might be a user read an article on, let's say, hybrid cloud computing. But we might find out that article, the user actually landed there directly from a search engine. So we'll take that into account. We might find out that, they were only on that page for a moment. So we'll throw out that interaction. We might find out that they downloaded a white paper on that topic. So we can weight and score that differently. And this is all contemplating the individual interactions. Mm-hmm. But B2B, not so much interested in the individual interactions. We want to roll all of that up to a company level, understand normal company level behavior, right? So to keep using the same example, how much does Boeing normally care about hybrid cloud computing, mm-hmm. so that we notice when there's a big spike? So we think about it in those two altitudes, like being really good at understanding the individual interactions, kind of like the grains of sand on the beach, but then using all of those to get a really good picture of a company's behavior as it compares to their normal baseline, if that made sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, is there a point like you take a company like Boeing where then you drill down at least some degree, location division, some kind of discipline, so it's not just trying to boil the ocean of Boeing and try to see where this is even coming from?
100%. So, and again, this is most useful in like a sales use case, mm-hmm. where an SDR or a salesperson needs to, really like hunt into a specific signal. And so, yeah, for those use cases, we get down to like a geo region, which in the United States can be into like a city, like Cisco area, or internationally it could be like a province. So it helps that salesperson kind of do the hunting.
Mm-hmm.
A little less useful from like a marketing or a campaigns perspective, where probably want to cast a wider net and reach multiple stakeholders and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, because it's. I mean, I'm also really curious right now. I mean, you've been at this for a while, right? I mean, you co-founded this company, a ton of experience here building this. Um, like over the past decade, it's easy to say, if I ask you what's changed, like, of course, AI has changed, but more specifically, like, what is really different for especially your customers and your publishers right now than maybe was pressing for them even a couple of years ago?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things that we're seeing is kind of like the reward around more flexible business models.
Mhm.
Whereas, over the years, there's been a little bit more, and this goes beyond data. This is kind of like just the vendor sphere in general. Of this idea of like, hey, if you're a marketer or you're a sales and marketing organization, we as a vendor, we're going to ask you to make a really big bet. You're going to have to pay up for something. It might be expensive. Then you got to figure out how to adopt it, how to get value from it, how to do change management around it.
Mhm.
And it feels like, and just kind of maybe as a coincidence or on a parallel path to AI, or maybe AI started to change, perceptions on the way things should work. It feels like now what's rewarded is flexibility, smaller bets, things that kind of like invite these incremental gains, as opposed to like, asking organizations to make these major points of adoption and kind of like go through these big change management exercises.
Mhm.
So in B2B, we see like a couple different ways that like the ecosystem can evolve to kind of like solve for that, but it's a pretty stark change, I'd say.
So does that also mean that there are changes in the kinds of tech companies that are looking to go and incorporate Bombora data?
I think so. Over the years, it's always been very heavy in B2B tech.
Mhm.
I think they tend to be the earlier adopters. So large, enterprises like Oracle, SAP, Cisco, Salesforce, Adobe, et cetera, like big B2B tech companies tend to be ahead on this stuff in
Mhm.
our experience. But we are starting to see, much more traction in finance and manufacturing and other verticals as well, which I think is a pretty normal evolution. Now, like as we get to these more kind of modular, flexible business models, I think that'll help everyone adopt things faster.
Mhm.
Um, because the tech companies have learned to be a little bit more nimble. Whereas I think, these newer approaches to bringing things to market can help others be similarly nimble.
Uh, One thing I'm so curious about your perspective on is that, like, I'm hearing a couple things from you that sound a little counterintuitive, if not countercultural in the business sense right now. Because at the LLM level, there's a lot of often doom and gloom prognostication right now that they've hit the limits of available data, and and then it's like then you just start training it on its own on data that's
Yeah.
created through their own systems, and so then does that lead to some of the dumbing down of what happens there? But there's also at the same time, it's like what other sources of untapped data out there, and it is eerily like this whole data is the new oil mantra. Some of what you're saying seems to go against the grain, if I'm hearing right, and I'm curious. Feel free to correct me on this too. That more data isn't always better; it isn't always necessary either. I mean, that like you can kind of get by with some fewer signals and you don't need everything like to actually do the job.
Yeah, no, I think no, I think we would say that with where everything is going, that more data is still certainly good.
Mhm.
I think the way that data gets transacted on, the way it gets made available is what we're seeing evolve. Like ideally, synthesizing lots of different go-to-market data points is difficult.
Mhm.
Large enterprises are okay at it, but still not great. Like all these different data elements that go into who might be ready for a phone call or who might be ready for a sales process. Um, more is better there still, always. Like
Mhm.
you need the ICP. You need to know who's coming to your website. You need to know who's installed the right technologies that make them a fit for your solution. You need to know who has intent. You need to know who's raised funding. You need to know who's had executive changes. There's a litany of B2B data that you need, and more of it is better. But the way that customers have been asked to kind of like transact and adopt that stuff, that I think is what is changing.
Okay.
Like you can either buy kind of a big slew of it inside of one platform. And there's pros and cons with that. Like naturally, like the individual sources themselves won't be quite as good because
Mhm.
you're this big conglomerated source. You're going to have less control, that type of thing. Or you can go buy it all individually, do these big data licenses with lots and lots of like best in breed data providers.
Mm.
So painful. And so I think what's changing and will change over the next 3 years is like, hey, how do you get access to best in breed data? More of an outcome based model. Like, hey, I want to pay for what I eat. I want to pay for the volume that I need. I want to pay when I get a good outcome, that type of thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, if we can bridge access to all the data a customer needs, make it the best available type of that data,
Mhm.
check the box, say you have it, but it's actually the best form of that data, but also give it to them in a way that makes sense from an adoption perspective. That's where we see things going.
Mhm. So, so then with that, like, there's also one thing that may never change is this constant push and pull of fragmentation versus consolidation. And so we've seen this with big tech repeatedly that there's some rich get richer, but there's a lot of there are a lot of niche players that are able to go and launch quickly and and solve some very specific needs. You see this like if you could probably break down the B2B sales cycle to hundreds of micro steps, and you see all these entrants coming in
Yeah.
at different parts there. Like are I'm curious what you're seeing as far as are we on a certain end of this side of this pendulum, and where is this now?
Yeah, I think what's coming next will be like that synthesis layer. Because like the actual and again, I'll come at this from a data provider perspective. I just rattled off all those different data points that you probably need to go to market effectively.
Mm.
I think there's still room for solutions around synthesizing all of that data, making it highly actionable for a particular end user.
Mm.
So like you can think of that on one hand as like, well, that's just one part of the value chain. You need all those different points of data, and you need a bunch of different ways to organize it and all of those things. So in a way, this is just another category that'll start to emerge, and we see lots of like newer partners in this space. But yeah, I think that's the next one where new players will evolve and like, hey, who can be best at making prescriptions based on the synthesis of lots and lots of different data points.
Mm. Yeah, it's so funny. I was actually just talking to someone on the GEO side, and generative engine optimization, and I was telling them, I'm like, I love what you're aggregating here. Like, when am I going to start getting these like just alerts in my language that say,
Yeah.
here's what to do with this? And now I think that expectation's also rising, right? It's not just that, like, you should be able to at least, if nothing more than plugging in some kind of LLM translator on top of what you're doing, like then, let alone, building something more sophisticated, actually deliver what's more and more becoming like that, insight.
Yes. Yeah, and I saw something in the chat as well, and I've heard you talk about this, David, with some of your stuff too. It's like we're not quite. It's we're getting there, but I don't know that like let's say a salesperson would work with a tool that could synthesize all of the information that's on the internet plus a bunch of important data about an account, get a prescription, and be like, wow, all right, that's gonna cut through the noise. Like stuff that's coming back is still just a little general. It's like, well, yeah, I'm gonna talk to Boeing about benefits for an aerospace company. Like, yeah, they're in aerospace. But we're getting there, and like I think I've heard you talk about this before. It's like that period where it could be easy to get disillusioned, But those that like follow all the way through with the cycle will see that, we're getting very close to where these prescriptions can be very accurate and timely.
So then, yeah, I mean, Earl Richards Jr. has taken this even a step further than I did, as he often does, and it talks about, he says we need to work on helping clients turn their data into information, information into insights, and insights into business impact, which is such an important step. Like, what role do you want to play in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like the way upstream, we're a data company first.
Mm-hmm.
Only so many things we can be good at. So we have to be really good at understanding, having a strong opinion at what a company's interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be really good at having a pool of anonymous devices that are targetable for B2B advertising.
Mm-hmm.
So like first things first. From there, we can have a strong opinion as to where those data assets add value and how they should be applied. Downstream of that, we rely on the ecosystem and lots of partnerships to make the data actually like go to the last mile and make those business impacts.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to say to ourselves, hey, let's build a whole platform around this and be the best at synthesizing multiple data sets, like we'd just be giving ourselves too much homework to be good at everything.
Well, and so that's why you built the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that also, I think, relates to Paula's question here in terms of options for small business. Is it really just a matter of the partners that are tapping into Bombora data and if they work with small businesses?
Yeah. And it always depends for us, blessing and a curse, vast surface area. It depends on your use case as well. Mm. So if it's an SDR type use case, we've got a bunch of sales intelligence platforms, like Cognism, Sales Intel, Lucia, Apollo, many, many others. And then if it's advertising, you're looking to launch some campaigns and get them into market. We work with lots of partners in adtech and ad platforms like Reddit and others. So it kind of depends on what you want to accomplish. But typically with a smaller company, you would work through one of our partners in one of those categories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they in turn want to serve in all these, all these different levels of the market. And so, where it really just becomes a big marketplace for that.
Yeah, that's right. And we certainly have, lots of relationships with large enterprise companies that buy the data directly and bring it into their own environment and do their own, modeling, and their data science and analytics teams work with the data directly. So we have both.
And on the publisher front, like, how do you determine what might be the right kind of publisher for you? What might be maybe too niche or too small, or how do you filter all that?
Yeah, great question. From a high level, like if you're a publisher and you're serving a B2B professional, helping a B2B professional do their job, creating content about somebody doing their job, mm-hmm. You're good for us. We have a lot of coverage across all verticals. So it's not like that there wouldn't be any B2B content that we wouldn't want to add into our mix, because we're really good at synthesizing it. We're really good at weighting it and scoring it and, re-baselining companies based on the addition of new sources. That's kind of like a core strength. So if you're in B2B or you're business focused, we've kind of like have a really good engine for bringing that content consumption into the models and making good use of it. And even broader content, it helps us from an identity perspective. It gives us more kind of like grist for the mill of getting better and better at making predictions as to what company a user works for. Mm-hmm. That's a core strength, is like we're good at synthesizing data. We wouldn't want like something that's purely B2C. That would be a little noisy, but otherwise we can take it all.
Mm-hmm. Do you wind up in scouting mode at all? Like, are there areas where you're like, oh man, there's some new trends emerging and publish, like we want to make sure that this is part of our set, like our partners sometimes asking you for certain kinds of publishers, even specific ones?
Yeah, always. We have a whole team that just runs the co-op. So they're constantly trying to figure out, who are the next block of publishers that we want to try to bring into the fold. And we have had large customers say like, hey, yeah, it looks like you have coverage, but we'd love you to work with this publisher. And they help make those introductions. And more, we're like helping to bridge these use cases together. Like our audience footprint can be used to do advertising direct to publisher.
Mm-hmm.
So more and more, we're trying to connect those dots for our publishing partners. Like we might be creating an audience for a big advertiser and be like, hey, if we're sending it, let's say to the trade desk, there's no reason why we can't send it to Forbes and Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal as well. And those advertisers are doing direct to brand advertising anyway. So we're just, again, like kind of like the glue that's helping to connect the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. It's great. And by the way, as there are other questions from attendees here, feel free to enter them in the chat or even raise your hand if you want to ask live. And and we already have an offer. So Jamie, go for it.
Hi, thanks for letting me ask. Just in that area where you end or start in terms of the synthesizing of data, do you ever get predictable about things? And what I mean by that is, go back to Boeing. We're noticing them becoming more nimble, or we're noticing them becoming more their want to change as a culture of the company. Is there an overarching culture or personality that you kind of label in some way, shape, or form about the companies to help with predictive models of how they might react in different ways to different stimulus, like AI coming in, and are they going to react quickly or not, or the economy's going to do something, how are they going to react?
No, great question. And I appreciate you joining my Boeing example. Spent 10 years using Boeing as an example for tracking account behavior. So yeah, one of the core strengths is this historical, kind of highly structured historical data set. So we publish the intent data week over week, going back many years. And so this allows us to look at any outcome. Let's say a set of companies that did a bunch of work around ESG. And we can look at the behavior of those companies over time. And to your point, then find other companies that are behaving very similarly. Some of those behaviors might be really obvious, like they have these spikes in research on topics directly related to ESG. Some might be, weird corollaries like, hey, companies that tend to invest a bunch in HR and employee relations also tend to do really well with ESG. So yeah, like anybody, we do this on behalf of customers, and customers certainly do it themselves on their own. Like anytime you're looking to make a prediction around a specific outcome, you can build that model using the historical data.
Right. Thanks, Jamie. Earl's got some questions too. What's the typical data maturity of your publishers that you work with?
It's a mix. Like the ones that, the publishers we work with are in all different businesses. They have different revenue models. So the large kind of business focused publishers I talked about, they're in the advertising business. And they're pretty good at applying data into their advertising campaigns from a targeting perspective and from an analytics perspective. They put them on the higher end of maturity, all the way down through these like longer tail niche B2B vertical publications, mostly in the lead gen business, sometimes in the events business. So they're using data to better promote campaigns or to better do lead scoring and things like that. So some of them are quite good at that. You might think of it intuitively as like a little less sophisticated, but it's really just a different way to apply data that's not ad tech focused. So it's a mix, and it certainly depends on kind of like what revenue model you have as a publisher.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then which teams from your publishers do you usually work with, like audience strategy, biz dev and sales, marketing, analytics, etc.?
Yeah. Also a mix. I'd say on the larger publisher side that are mostly in the advertising business, it's a lot of ad ops from a day-to-day perspective, right? Because they're the ones launching campaigns, providing reporting and analytics against campaigns, that type of thing. And then like down in the longer tail of the B2B niche trade publication, we're working with executive leadership to get buy-in to the cooperative, and then to start to like connect us into the other teams that can make use of the data. I'd say like you can imagine kind of the more niche you are, a little bit more closely you'll hold your data. Right? Like you have this really specific audience of banking professionals in the United States. Very few publishers have this kind of like condensed access to those users. So you're going to be a little bit more kind of like thoughtful about how you enter into a proposition that shares that data. And we have an amazing co-op team that's taken our kind of approach and our ethos as a business and like done a really good job evangelizing that across the publisher community.
So, I'd be remiss not to ask a bit about some of the challenges overall that are happening, and I'm seeing a lot tied to B2B data. One of them is that there are a lot of players out there that are all about quantity and not about quality at all, right? And that I mean, my fear is that the problem of noise, and especially noise to signal, and some talked about that signal to noise ratio in the chat, is just it's like the tragedy of the commons. It's to make things worse for everyone because there are a lot of bad actors out there. And so how much quality control does Bombora need to do with the partners you're working with in the ecosystem, since you are some of that glue out there?
Oh, interesting. So like when we think about companies that we will partner with, yeah, that's interesting. I think like, we want to position, hopefully rightfully, as like the gold standard when it comes to B2B intent data. So the partners that are working with us, they're making a larger investment, work with Bombora, make it available to customers. So right away, we're kind of like aligned, because there are ways, to your point, we live in a competitive landscape where there's other flavors of intent data. But it's kind of like self-qualifying. The partners we're working with are making that investment, and they're using this data set that has, we know where it's coming from, consent from end users, true baseline, so that we understand when there's a real spike in interest in research. So hopefully we're taking care of that by, finding customers willing to make that investment.
So this is fantastic because, data is the new oil and all that. But my question is going to make Berkowitz roll his eyes. It's about blockchain-based solutions around, I don't want to get techie, but around the decentralization method, just to make that data more reliable so the middleman is out of it and anyone with any intent is kind of out of it. How are you distinguishing your proof using blockchain or any of those kinds of digital DLT services, ledger, stuff like that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we're actively like in that right now, but I'd love to hear, and not to turn it back on you, an example from what you know of our business of like how that could apply in a customer context or otherwise. I think we have lots of ways that we do validation, but measurement and validation is probably like the most important thing that we can do for customers. So if there are better, smarter ways to approach that, I'd love to hear.
I'll talk to you about it later, but just one thing that might be a relevant topic for everyone as well is with the nano banana kind of thing is just like the latest flavor, no pun intended. And all of a sudden the line is everything you see on the internet is now for sure not something that you can rely as being truth. I mean, it's just so good. Data is the same thing. It's not just imagery and things like that. How are you tackling that from a differentiation standpoint so you can guarantee your information?
Yeah, so we touched on it a little bit before, but it starts with like if we can be provided a truth set, then we can compare the behavior of that truth set to a control group and find a distinct behavioral pattern. Right? So let's say we use Boeing. We know that Boeing was selling something and 100 customers bought it, right? We know we have that truth set. We know the dates that it was purchased. We can find a distinct behavioral pattern from those 100 accounts, a research pattern that we saw across our cooperative that differs from another 100 accounts of about the same size. And we can go deeper into specifically how we do the control group creation, which is really important. But once we can do that, we basically know the behavioral pattern, and we can be pretty good at identifying other companies that are behaving the same way.
It's like the Facebook mirroring thing. It's just pretty obvious.
Yeah, that's right. What's fun, one trick of it is, let's say we get these, I use this number of 100 closed won accounts from a customer. We can't just compare it to a control group of some other 100 accounts. We need to make sure that those other 100 accounts are about the same size and that we see them the same amount, right? Because if we just take another 100 random accounts that are maybe smaller or that we don't have the same visibility into, it's hard to make an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah. So the fact is you have all that comparative data means you can match apples to apples.
Yeah. And it's also a big advantage of this idea of kind of like a closed ecosystem that we can observe across. So like other kind of more temporal data sets, they're typically able to make observations across kind of like a moving target. Like, okay, I see these behavioral interactions on the internet, but where on the internet is always changing. The access I have to the internet is always changing. So the reliability of any like kind of trend data or historical data that comes from that is very low. But we have this kind of like controllable ecosystem that we can keep like kind of like tuning and relying upon. And that like allows that historical capability to have a lot more fidelity.
So one last point, here's a radical idea talking about it in an MIT think tank last weekend, and is how do we make this advertising supported future that we in this group wouldn't mind? How do we actually get the bad guys out? And that means maybe the company's not making $1 billion opening it up like Zuckerberg did and said, everyone's welcome, come on and use the system, to you know what, we're going to vet you. You're going to make sure you are who you are, and make sure that the ecosystem advertisements aren't going to, rip you off. There's certain criteria. Is that an association element? Is that something that AIMG could actually champion? Is it Interactive Advertising Bureau? I mean, who would police that and actually have a good housekeeping seal of approval of here's a marketplace where we've kind of assessed and we just haven't just opened the back door?
Yeah. And then like, how do we deal with some of the fundamental challenges? One of my perhaps less popular opinions is that it's just too easy to buy domains.
Yeah.
And so you just see how some of the access and ease and all of these seemingly really good things have created some intractable problems.
So register your domain and your gun. I hear you.
There you go. And there was yet another David in the chat, Mike, just to as a kind of clarifying point, is saying, so exclusivity to the data de facto establishes veracity, which becomes the competitive differentiator.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it, right? Like there's, I think it's 86% of all the interactions that we're able to see on a daily basis are exclusive to us. So that certainly helps. Now, a lot of the publishers that we work with, their data is very difficult to get to for another provider anyway, because like they don't make their inventory available on the bid stream. It's just not kind of out there. But that, having exclusivity over the other chunk helps as well.
And then also relating to some of this, as far as like, you talked about kind of normalizing data, and Earl had another good question. So, have your existing clients shared their numbers with your teams so your teams can better weight the value and impact of your data that they're using, and for data source scoring? Like, what data do you get back?
Yeah, so that's like we mentioned it a couple of times, but if a customer, we're not a platform, so it's not like we're constantly bi-directionally reading our customers' data, changing our algorithms and sending it back. We have partners that kind of get there. But yeah, we have lots of customers that'll periodically 3 or 4 times a year send us some closed won data and allow us to like retune the intent signals that we're providing to them. So we might find that, hey, customers that close won, they tend to spike on this set of topics at this time. at this kind of like intensity level, and we can kind of like retune their signals accordingly.
Mm, and when you're talking about retuning signals, how much of that winds up being specific versus general?
Well, it's always very specific in that it's, based on their closed won data. It's for that specific customer. Now, like kind of by design, we do live in a world of a set structured taxonomy. And there's a bunch of good reasons for that. But so it's always going to be within that kind of like intentional limitation of like we can only return signals back against this like set of topics that we monitor for across the co-op. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. And so now looking forward, like what else is it? Could you share anything more about like where the roadmap is or things that are like coming up for you?
Yeah, we talked a lot and amazing engagement. Thank you on this call about our intent data business, but we're also innovating quite a bit around our audience business. So I mentioned it earlier in the overview. As part of the cooperative, we have anonymous B2B professionals, and we're able to tie B2B attributes to those devices and make those addressable for advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of our business is, growing very quickly. And we have a bunch of newer things that we're working on for that kind of theater of our business. I'll mention a couple of them. One is ABM measurement. So a big chunk of B2B advertising is targeting a set of accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So IBM wants to reach a set of 1,000 key accounts. We have the ability to take that list of accounts, turn it into an addressable audience. We've always been able to do is make that addressable and targetable. But where we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years is also being able to deliver back to IBM what accounts they reached, at what frequencies, what job titles, job functions, etc. So providing the reporting back to IBM in this example, so that they can pull that into their data environments and build that into their models as well.
And so, is that something that it sounds like things I've heard from some of your partners having done their own version of that?
Yes. So this goes back to this idea of kind of like in a more open ecosystem, more flexible business models. And our partners have amazing, offerings in their own right. Mm-hmm. That's a model. That's one way to do ABM advertising. You buy into a platform that has a DSP. That DSP comes with reporting. Great. There's another way that we see the ecosystem working, which is I already work with the trade desk, or I already work with DV360. I want to do my ABM advertising on those large DSPs, but I don't want to have to sacrifice reporting. I want to be able to get ABM reporting there as well. And so that's one of the areas where we've innovated and be able to provide that reporting kind of in a more open ecosystem model, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And if there are
one area within the audience space, another is like starting to work with other account level data, I'll say brethren, who have really interesting account level data attributes, and helping them to translate their account level data into targetable audiences as well. So we'll have a number of those partnerships coming out where it's like, hey, I want to do good ABM or good B2B advertising. I love Bombora data, but I'd love to be able to have some of these other, again, best in breed, premium branded data sets that I can also target with advertising. So it's another way that we're looking to kind of democratize access to high quality data for specific use cases in a flexible way, if that makes sense.
It does, and I'm glad you also brought up ABM. I mean, this was where when I first was encountering Bombora in the wild, it was from ABM platforms that were all saying they integrated with you, and I had to dive deeper and understand. Well, wait, like, why is this data so good and powerful? Like why, why are they touting this, right?
Yeah, and we work with all the ABM platforms, and they're great partners. And there's different customers want different models. Mm-hmm. For some customers, that platform model works great, and they have big businesses and successful part of the ecosystem. And then other customers, they might operate in a little bit more of kind of like an open environment where they use different platforms for different use cases, and they want data that can connect through to that kind of more disparate stack.
I mean, do you get a sense if there's any shift, and I know this is a bit removed from what you do specifically, but from what you're seeing out there in terms of how people are acting on this, where there's some more of like the mass targeting everyone at Boeing, right? Or everyone in a certain geography department, something like that, versus trying to take this and then see like, okay, we've got these 5 contacts at Boeing. We're going to now go deep in these one-to-one outreach and programs here. Are you seeing any shifts in like appetite for doing one more than the other? Has that changed at all?
Yeah, I think it's use case based. So certainly sales use case, precision.
Mm-hmm.
I think inside of like an advertising use case, you can kind of like reach some diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm.
It's all right. Congratulations, you found the right 10 people at Boeing, but it's like, hey, there's a bigger committee. There's like, it's a long sales cycle. If it's a top of funnel campaign, you want to build much more of a chorus. So it really depends on the use case.
So that sounds a bit like what Mark Pritchard at P&G had said early on about just targeting on Facebook, that they found that like once they segmented the audience too narrowly, then they were missing a lot of that opportunity.
Yeah, that, and it's like for a lot of platforms, won't mention any specifically, but some of them, like, it knocks their algorithms out of whack. So like you're not getting any more. You're actually now you have to pay a lot more to reach this small group of people. You could probably have paid the same amount, still reach those people, cast a wider net. So depending on the platform, micro-targeting can hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, guys. I put my video on because I'm in the islands in the Caribbean. I know you're jealous. This is my tan. Yeah, my question was just to get clarity on working with a platform like Oracle. Depending on the clients, obviously they'll have a different tech stack depending on their level of maturity and sophistication. We get that. So I'm curious, how does Oracle integrate into their platform with the data? Because you're adding additional data for their target accounts, their audience segments. So I'm just kind of curious how the plumbing works, essentially.
Yeah, and you mean if you're a customer that's like doing go-to-market work on the Oracle stack, like Unity, Eloqua, that type of thing?
Yeah. Well, more like if you are providing the data for whatever initiative that they have, whether it's B2C or B2B, how would a client go about integrating your data into their stack so they can use it?
Got it. So in this case, Oracle is just kind of like a hypothetical customer of ours.
Oracle is the vendor providing the data to a potential SMB or agency or adtech solution. Where does Oracle play a part, I guess? What's their role, I guess?
Yeah, so one way we would work with a customer that might be like built around Oracle tools, like Eloqua or Unity, their CDP. And so we would be able to say like, okay, we curate these intent data signals kind of upstream, and then we're able to push those into really any environment, Oracle being one of them, and make that data actionable for different use cases. That space of like what used to be more of like the marketing automation space, I think is evolving into a CDP type space, is a good example of like, those are great places to integrate the data, because they can then push downstream into sales use cases or lead scoring use cases or other kind of internal systems that can, get customers to outcomes.
Got it. And obviously Oracle and the partnerships, you have your own tech solutions to CDPs, for examples, and marketing automation like Eloqua. So I was just kind of wondering how that works into clients who have their own solutions in place and that kind of conversations. That's usually what I run into from my end.
It's always like we work to get as elegant and like, we want the data to be ubiquitous. So kind of like one end of the spectrum is like, nah, we don't have a direct integration, but we have a team that can get the data into that particular CDP. Maybe it's a CDP, not a lot of something used or something like that, all the way down through like, yep, we have elegant, out of the box integration with CDP A, and like or Adobe CDP is a good example of that. where a customer were to buy access to the Bombora intent data, we can turn it on, immediately in the Adobe CDP because there's a pre-built integration.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Mike, just any further thoughts, like what's ahead for you, things that should also be top of mind for folks as as marketers and others in our space, just try to make the most of our access to data and what we do with it?
Yeah. I think try to tie it together. The themes that we've covered is think about things through the lens of specific use cases and outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
How a company like Bombora or others can kind of in a more localized, precise way get you to that outcome in a flexible way, so that you don't have to boil the ocean and think about a complete change management project or totally changing your sales and marketing culture in one fell swoop. But how you can get premium, best in breed data for specific outcomes in a way that is nimble and allows you to move quickly.
Great. Well, this is tremendous. I mean, it's so great. Yeah, just again, coming across Bombora so much in the wild, and yeah, having been an indirect customer of yours many times over, then getting to understand so much more about how it works and how this whole ecosystem comes together in a way that I think a lot of us might not fully appreciate, and I think it allows so many members here to just ask smarter questions and look to do just better work with all of this, because without great B2B data, we're all none of us could do our job. So appreciate what you're doing to not just in the ecosystem, but to help connect it.
Of course. Yeah, no, and I appreciate you having me and all of the great engagement and questions and, very detailed, granular. Appreciate the thoughtfulness.
Excellent. Well, come by again anytime. It's great to connect with you here. And thanks to you and your team for making this happen.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
See you, Mike.